So, welcome parents to the first of our 5 intended webinars to talk through with you and the parents of Year 11 the situation regarding the GCSE grading this year in 2021. In this session, I'm going to clarify some key information that's been shared by the Department for Education and Ofqual, which oversees the exams. I'm going to talk through the approach that we are taking. I'm going to talk through our expertise in school. I'm going to talk through the support that we have for staff to make informed judgments about your children and the steps that we will take up to May half term. I'm not going to talk through the appeals process because I'm going to save that for a later date. And we think that our next webinar will be on March 29th at 5 p.m, when hopefully we'll have been given more information then from the exam boards, and we will be able to have some further data in school with which we'll be able to talk through with you. So I'm going to share the slides and I am going to read it. And the reason why is this is so important. I don't actually want to miss anything. So some key information from the Department for Education. The teachers in school will decide the grade that pupils have achieved. And I think this is because they believe that teachers know the pupils best and they want us to make a holistic judgment of the pupils. Teachers in school are supported in making this judgment through exemplar material from the exam board, and they will provide examples of work at a particular grade. Yesterday, I attended a webinar for the Department for Education, and what they advised yesterday is that any exemplar material that is provided by the exam board will be publicly available after Easter. The grades that we give the children are based on the work they have completed, not the work they have missed. And this is really important because this year we're not assessing the full exam syllabus. The government and the Department for Education believe that actually it would be too difficult to assess the full exam syllabus. And so we are assessing the work that has been taught. And I will talk through with you in a moment what we have done to actually make sure that all the key assessment objectives have been met for your children. Exam grades will be submitted to the exam board on June the 18th from school, and there's a huge quality assurance process that I will talk through with you now, and that will be, I will talk through in this presentation. I'll give further details on that, and I will also make all of that publicly available. So everything that we do in school will be transparent and on our website. Pupils get their GCSE results early this year. They get them on August the 12th. For A-levels, it is August the 10th. So how are we approaching this in school? When we returned in June, I said to the Year 10s, I sat them all down and I explained that every piece of work they did may count towards their GCSE grades. At that time, we had already submitted the grades for the Year 11 who left last year. And I said to them, you have to imagine that GCSEs will be cancelled. I couldn't imagine that they were going to continue and that they were going to allow GCSE exams to take place. I wish we'd have known then in June their intentions that actually they were going to cancel the exams. But we prepared for that and we told all the children in terms of what they needed to do, and that we said to them, work as if every piece of work that you do counts towards their GCSE grades. Attend school, make sure that you're here, have the right attitude, and that actually hard work will be rewarded. In June and July, our subject team sat down and they planned which aspects of their curriculum should be taught in September to December, so that we knew that the key assessment objectives in every subject were met. And we spent a considerable amount of time doing this. We did it because we knew, obviously, in Rochdale, we still had a high number of cases. And we did it to assume that actually children would be missing school. And I think that we were very proactive in that, in the work that we did. We didn't just assume that actually we would come back in September and everything would be, restrictions ended, that we assumed that there still would be quite a lot of disruption. And that was partly why as well we did our 60-40 model, which I am very proud that we did this, because it meant we were able to minimise disruption to learning. Our model, our 60-40 model, was always about learning and equity. We wanted to know that we could make sure that pupils were getting live learning, and if they were isolated, that they were still getting at least 2 days with their teacher where they were actually getting the live lessons in the way that you've seen it at home. We wanted to make sure that the highest quality teaching and learning was delivered from September to December, and that key concepts were covered. And that period of June to July, we spent a lot of time planning what needed to be taught and when, and how we could do it really well online. And I'm very proud of what we did there. And it has actually been used, our practice there has been used as an example of global best practice by the Education Development Trust. The main bit was making sure it was equitable. We didn't want to have certain students who may have to self-isolate, being disadvantaged by their peers in school, learning and progressing above them. And that bit of equity, you can see it on our values at the bottom of the screen, is the first thing that we do. It's the value that drives us as a school and as a leadership team. We also, as well, have made sure that an internal quality assurance has been taking place throughout. And in January of 2021, myself and my senior staff met with all the subject leaders to look at the assessment design, not just in year 11, but in year 7 to 11. And we've spent a long time making sure that what they were measuring was what they were supposed to measure. So all the subject leaders had to submit all of their assessments for year 7 to 11, and they sat down and they met with myself and others to actually look at whether the questions that they were delivering to the pupils measured what it was they were supposed to be. So validity is quite simply, does an assessment measure what it is supposed to measure? And I'll give you an example of where an assessment wouldn't. If you have a maths question that is framed in a lot of complex language, then what that is assessing is the ability of the child to read, not their ability to understand maths. So we've been very, very clear that actually, are your assessments valid? Are they measuring what it is they're supposed to really measure? And in terms of reliability, in terms of an assessment term, is do the assessments that we are delivering allow us to make some good inferences from them? i.e., is it giving us useful information? Lockdown 3 from January, and what we did. But we knew our assessments had been ongoing because we were able to deliver throughout September to December assessments. And that meant that during the autumn term, our practice online had been refined. So during lockdown 3, the assessments and the quality of teaching and learning that we were able to deliver to the pupils was of the highest standard. And we were able to get a lot of information in the autumn term, and we've also been able to get information from January as well. We did hold mock exams in English and maths, and we used that to make sure that we were able to benchmark the data, so were the teachers marking effectively and correctly, and we were able to look at that to be able to target where pupils were underachieving. So throughout year 7 to 9, your children will have been undertaking assessments, mid-year assessments, which are benchmarked nationally, and it gave us a good indication of where those pupils were. For example, if there was a child who came in with good Key Stage 2 SATs, high reading age, but actually their results in English and maths were very low, we were able to benchmark what had taken place in that assessment. We've been sharing the grades with you, and that's made it very clear as to where pupils are working at. And we're going to continue to do this, and there are 2 more sets of grades that will be shared with you before your children leave. And we've made the decision to do that, to actually share the grades the children are currently working at and what their potential grade could be. And we've done that so that we're open, honest and transparent all the way through. As I said before, all subject leaders have submitted the assessments they are using to ensure all the assessment objectives were met. And that will be publicly shared with you as well on the websites. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So how do we know what we're doing? How can you trust me to be able to know what it is that we were doing? I've been at the school since 2015. It's my 6th year now as the head of Phalange. Your children have had the best curriculum since year 7. It is excellent practice. It's recognised nationally, our curriculum, because we're able to identify very clearly the acquisition of knowledge and the application of subject-specific skills. And we work with people at the cutting edge of curriculum design and assessment design. So we've known all the way through that they've been getting the very, very best. Quality of teaching and learning is of a consistently high standard across the school, and I'm very proud that we've been able to improve that in the years that I've been here. And we know that because, again, we work with people who are leading nationally and internationally on teaching and learning. We bring them into our school, we ask them to have a look at it, not just not Ofsted, but people who are engaged in that understanding of what makes a good lesson. And we've been working with them for some time now. Our professional learning for teachers is incredibly strong. We are one of only a handful of schools in the country where we've got a gold standard for our professional learning. And that's something that we've worked on very hard since I've been at the school. After the GCSE exams last year, I looked for examples of bias. I looked to see if there were any groups that were unfairly disadvantaged, and there weren't. And I think that this is useful because we had been highlighted by the Social Mobility Commission as one of only 10 schools where children who had been on free school meals consistently did better than their peers for 3 years, for consecutive 3 years. So we had data from previous years, and I was able to look at the data of the GCSE exams last year to see if there were any areas, any subject areas where children were unfairly disadvantaged because of teacher bias, and were there any groups of pupils as well who had been unfairly disadvantaged. In terms of assessment training, since 2016, we've worked with an organisation called Evidence-Based Education, who lead on assessment design across this country and internationally. We've got 11 staff trained as assessment leads, and 3 senior staff who are with me tonight, Mr. Ward, Mrs. York, and Mrs. O'Reilly, have all gained their assessment lead status, as have I. And I'm also working towards a chartered status as an educational assessor. And what that means is that's a year-long portfolio of work that I'm contributing to, so that it requires me to look at assessment practices, not just in our school, but in lots of other schools as well, to ensure that it's of a high standard. And I'm on the board of an organisation called Evidence-Based Education, and that's a national and international organisation which has some of the best academics about assessment on that board. So for those of you who are in education, Professor Dylan William and Professor John Hatter both sit on that board with me. Professor Dylan William is based at Harvard University, John Hatter at Melbourne University. So we surround ourselves constantly and check whether what we are doing is accurate. And we've applied that as well to this assessment process for the GCSEs. So our plan. Before I share with you, obviously, our plan, we presented our plan to the Chartered Institute of Educational Assessors, and it's being used as best practice. On my way home this evening, I had a conversation with somebody, and the work that we're doing is going to be used by the exam boards as best practice. We presented as well, we had a meeting, the 4 of us last week, with academics who lead internationally on an assessment, and they said if there was a continuum of good to bad, then we're at the very, very good end. So I am confident in terms of that our plan is rigorous and robust, and I'm sharing this with you because I want you to have confidence in what it is that we're doing. All subject leaders, as I said, have met with the SLT, that's ourselves, senior leadership team, and there will be further quality assurance of assessments from now until the end of May. We've got meetings with every subject leader next week, whereby we will sit down and we will make sure that they are moderating effectively, that they are standardising effectively in terms of the exam grades, and also as well that the assessments are strong. It means I'm not as visible over the next 2 weeks as I would like to be, and that a lot of my time is in meetings. But this is your children's future, and I'm not prepared to take a risk or a gamble on this with our subject leaders who may be struggling. And what I say in that, our subject leaders are incredibly strong. They know what they are doing. They are being quality assured by us. And again, this will continue for another 2 sessions up until May. All data that is submitted to us, we benchmark from Key Stage 3. So the mid-year assessments that they do, we look at that. As I say, we look for any outliers. Is there anything that is going wrong? Is there anything that, are there any children who look as though they're underperforming? But we also as well don't use that to just limit children. I don't think you can limit possibilities of children. And I think that even if a child came in from primary school with low scores, or even if a child joined our school, perhaps as an international new arrival from, midway through Key Stage 3 or in Key Stage 4, that actually the possibilities for them are endless. So we don't limit it just based on their Key Stage 2 data. All subject leaders will be expected to attend exam board training, and any training offered, we will be attending. And I give very few directives at our school to the staff, but this is a directive and a 3-line whip. Anything that comes up, any exam board training, we will be attending. For example, I attended the Department for Education webinar yesterday. So within that, I plan to be able to make sure that what is happening is strong. So from now until May half term, assessments will happen in class, and they've been quality assured by myself, my assessment leads. And as I say, that quality assurance will take place at least another 2 times. We're going to share grades with you. So no surprises in August. You're going to get 2 more sets of grades that come through before the May half term. And that's the grade that your children are currently working at, and they can improve. That's the key bit. From this point, they can improve, and I'll say a little bit more about that on the final slide. For children who have an additional need, they are being given additional support as they would do if they were to sit an exam. I'm a very inclusive head teacher. I really believe in inclusion, and it does run through me like a sticker of rock. And we need to absolutely make sure that children who would have access arrangements or may be disadvantaged because of their additional needs get the same opportunities as everybody else. And there is a big piece of work that we are undertaking here to make sure that that additional support is transparent to you as parents, and is also as well what they would be getting within the exams. And we will share that again. Or each subject has a number of assessments that they're doing in class, and all of those assessments will be on the website. And on the website as well, we will be including all the training that staff have attended. So everything that we do and all the assessments that may be used towards your child's final grade will be available for you to see. You just need, but it probably will be just after Easter when all that is up on the website. We are going to use the optional material from the exam boards. Now, it's a very interesting thing that the Department for Education have done here. I say interesting, I'm not quite sure that's the word that I mean. But when it came out, when the consultation came out, it said that the exam boards would release some optional material. We'd all thought that there would be some specific questions that we would be expected to answer, but we don't have to. We are going to use some of that material from the exam boards. And the reason why we're going to do that is to make sure that the grading and the mapping of the grades and the questions that are being asked by the exam boards are used in our school to support our grades. And we think it's a no-brainer really to use them. We think it's important that we do use those. As I say, I found out yesterday, and it's actually caused quite a lot of discussion amongst the education community about the fact that all this material will be available after Easter for parents and pupils to have a look at. After each assessment that has taken place in class, there's moderation and standardisation, and we do have a large number of our staff who do mark for exam boards. So there's other expertise within school there. So between now and up to May half term, assessments take place in class. They've been taking place online. We've also as well got mocks. We've got a wealth of information that we've got, and we're also after Easter going to be using some of the optional material. There's no new content that's being taught from Easter because we know that the way that we've done it is we've covered most of it. So we are able to actually ensure that our procedures are in place to get a good picture of your children's performance. In May, we will explore where we feel some children have not quite met some assessment objectives. And that might be, say, for example, if a pupil has been absent for a long period of time due to illness, due to COVID, due to a bereavement, then what we will do is we are going to make sure that there are opportunities to meet these in the first 2 weeks of June. And those first 2 weeks of June in school, there'll be moderation at my level and senior staff's level, standardisation and quality assurance. We haven't been told yet when the pupils can actually leave. Nobody's actually shared that information with us as yet. And we know there's a huge amount that we have to do in terms of moderation and standardisation. The work that we've got, which will be available, and we'll probably send this out to you all after this, at some point over the next 2 weeks, the centre policy will be available for you all to see. And I have to send that off to the exam boards, and the exam boards have to be very clear that what we're doing is effective. But there is a lot of unknown. There's been a lot of unknown and uncertainty throughout this whole exam process. The lateness of finding out how exams, what the assessment would be, didn't come through until we came back after the February half term. The material from the exam boards isn't out yet. And there's a lot of managing the unknown, and this has been the case throughout the pandemic. But for GCSEs, the information has been particularly last minute. And in my opinion, that is not good because it creates uncertainty, it creates anxiety, not just in yourselves and your children, but in terms of us, in terms of what it is that we've got to do. And so throughout this whole process, we've decided we know what we're doing in assessment is of a high quality. And so we've been making sure that we've been working. We've not been waiting for the information to come out. We've been working all the way along. We're going to be very transparent with you. So as I say, this is the first of 5 webinars and they'll be recorded and on the website. We're going to share grades. So there's very few surprises for you in August. And they absolutely can still improve between now up until the end of May. And that's a really important thing that I want parents to go home with tonight. We've used external partners as a critical friend to our practice. We've triangulated it with any information that we have in school. Grades can go up and they are very highly unlikely to go down. So the grades that your children have at this moment in time and what they are currently working at, unless there is some big event whereby they're not in school for the next 6 weeks, or whereby they leave school for some unknown reason, it is highly unlikely that the grades that they have will go down. They are more likely to go up because there are still opportunities for the assessments that we are undertaking within school to demonstrate an improvement. And flexible and adaptable to whatever is expected of us by the exam board. So, for example, the webinar I was on with the Department for Education was a huge shock to us all in education yesterday, that they said that they were going to share the optional material. with publicly, you know, but we have to adapt to that. And I think that one of the things that we've been able to do, hopefully you've seen it as parents, is throughout the pandemic is we've shown our flexibility and adaptability to whatever is thrown at us. I know it's not easy, this process, and I'm sure many of you have got questions. I know some of you have submitted questions previously, but what I'm going to do now is I am going to stop my share. Okay, so I think I've got Mr. Ward on my screen. I don't know if you want to just spotlight me there, Mr. Ward, for me to answer the questions. So I've got a series of questions and answers that will come through.
Okay, Miss Allen, so we've had two questions that have come in advance of the meeting and one that's come through so far. If you have got any questions that have arose during the meeting, if you want to click on the bottom menu bar where it says Q&A, and you can submit your questions to us now, and then obviously Miss Allen will respond. So the first question that came through in advance of the meeting, it says, a question for this evening is, with the students not actually taking exams, at what point will a decision be made for their final grade? Is there still time to improve on their potential grade?
So I hope I've just made it clear there that actually there is still the potential to be able to improve their final grade, because the information that we have at this moment in time, the data capture, Mrs. O'Reilly, you might want to come in at this point. The information that we had and the current grades that I've been working at were submitted to us. We've got some information in December, and there's another grade that's been submitted that will go into the database tomorrow. That will be shared with you before Easter. And as long as your children keep turning up, keep doing the work, keep making sure that actually they are fulfilling the expectations that their teachers are setting for them in terms of assessments, then their grades absolutely can go up. Mrs. O'Reilly, did you want to say anything else on that?
Yeah, just to reiterate what you said there in terms of the way that we're working with the teachers is very much a teach assess model. So if your child is currently on a grade 3, for example, the teacher will be doing and sharing everything with the child about how to get to a grade 4, and then giving them the opportunity to show that in an assessment. So as long as your child is obviously attending school, but also doing the assessments that the teachers are giving and performing at the next grade, then there is a high possibility that they will go up in terms of their grade.
I think as well on that, what we are doing for those children who are wanting to achieve the top grades in terms of grade 8 and grade 9, we're also making sure as well they get the opportunity, all of them to demonstrate that they are capable of working at a grade 8 and a grade 9. So in answer to the question, grades can go up, and as I said, it is very, very highly unlikely that they will go down. Okay. Do you want to, Mr. Ward, do you want to tell the question that's been submitted, and Mrs. O'Reilly can do the questions that are in the Q&A? We can take it in turns, maybe.
Yeah. Will there be options for alternative assessments or reworded questions for children with autism? Can parents of children with autism perhaps have input into how the grades are being assigned and the options for additional assessments?
So in terms of parents engaging with us in the actual question design, I'm afraid that isn't the case. There's nowhere in the guidance that says that actually can take place. And in an exam, that wouldn't necessarily be the case as well. The assessments that we are doing, as I say, the SEN, for children who've got SEND, we are absolutely making sure that the access arrangements that they would have within a normal exam series are met in the assessments that are being done within class. And it may not necessarily be that it's extra time, we're just making sure that the assessments, we're making sure that actually any child who has SEND is not disadvantaged because of this situation. That is really, really important. So it's important to me personally, but it's important to us as a school, because obviously in terms of equity, it would be unfair if that was the case. But parents can't work with us in terms of the question design, because that's been through a process as we described in terms of our expertise within school to look at assessment questions. One of the things that I can say is that in the subject leader meetings that we've been having with parents, with senior leaders and subject leaders, we have been making sure that those assessment questions do not disadvantage any child with additional needs. So the example I gave in terms of maths, we're making sure there's not lots of wordy questions, and that it's that we're testing a child's ability to read. We're testing a child's ability to fulfill what has been taught. And we're really, really clear in terms of that. And Mrs. York, I don't know if you want to come in at this moment in time in terms of literacy and how we've, and our work on that.
Yeah, so we just make sure that we don't have any vocabulary that may be in questions that would disadvantage students because they are unsure about what that vocabulary means. And in all our subject areas, our schemes of learning have identified what we would call tier 3 and tier 2 vocabulary, which is like the technical words in each subject, and also other words that are needed for children to communicate their understanding in those subjects. And they are identified on our curriculum area schemes of learning, and they are specifically taught to the children.
And I think as well, I think this goes back when I said on one of my slides that our curriculums of an excellent standard. We have taught, Mrs. York specifically, across the school has led on vocabulary since I've been at the school. And we've taught explicitly vocabulary, tier 2 vocabulary, tier 3 vocabulary. We've been teaching that since your children have been in year 7. And it's been a very explicit, intentional approach for us to be able to do that. Do you want to just say what tier 2 vocab is, Mrs. York?
So tier 2 vocabulary is the vocabulary that we don't really use in everyday conversation. So everyday social conversation isn't what we call tier 2. Tier 2 is that academic vocabulary that you would find actually in exam questions, that you would find in textbooks and in academic books. It's the vocabulary that makes you sound a little bit posh and a little bit sophisticated, but isn't necessarily the technical subject-specific words like photosynthesis in science. So that's the type of vocabulary that we have been targeting and teaching to make sure that our children can understand everything they read and also can articulate and communicate and write what they understand about those subjects.
Thanks. So I don't know if Mrs. O'Reilly and Mr. Ward want to take the questions in one at a time. Mrs. O'Reilly, you go first.
Yeah, we've had some great questions in. The first one is about somebody asking about their son in particular. I think we've sort of answered it, which is just they've been told their grade in a subject, but they've since done some other work that perhaps means that their grade's going to go up, and the teacher has told them that the grade will be corrected in the final data. And I think we can just say, yes, that is accurate. The teachers. So, for example, if a student's done an assessment today, that won't necessarily be reflected in the data capture that you're going to get at the end of March, or the report that you're going to get at the end of March, but your child might know that they've done particularly well in that. But then when you get the next report in May, you will see the improvements that your child has made. So that one, and the same parent has also said thank you to us for giving information and saying that he really appreciates that and can see that we're really caring about his son's future.
Well, thank you so much, because this situation, for me, being head teacher is a real privilege. I absolutely love the job. And there's been times this past year when it's been really hard. And there's been times when I thought maybe I just want to walk away from it all and do something a little bit easier. But actually, your children just inspire me. And there is no way that we would do anything to disadvantage your children. We will do everything that we can to make sure that they get the opportunities to get the grades that they deserve, that they are capable of, and that takes them on to the next step. Because it is, We have a quote in school: a person's true potential is unknown and unknowable. And that's the way I see your children, the way I've seen them from day one. So thank you for that. And there's lots of work that can be done to improve. And the subject teachers will be absolutely working with your children to make sure that they improve over these next, these next couple of weeks. And we're transparent with you all the way through. Mr. Ward, what's the next question?
The next question says, will after-school additional revision classes be offered like in previous years before assessments?
So we've been running, and we did it even during the 60-40 model and during lockdown 3. We have been offering sessions in the morning. We've been offering sessions after school. All the content has pretty much been taught now. And what the children need to be able to do is to do their assessments in class. There are opportunities for children to stay behind after school and to work with their teachers and to be able to improve. We would always do that. We're not going to offer any Easter revision classes because they're very much about revising for an exam. So the strategies that you need to be able to revise for an exam. Because of the way that we are doing these in-class assessments, the children are well prepared for them. Mrs. York, do you want to say what we've been doing in some English classes?
In regards to expert assessment? No.
In terms of morning sessions, yeah.
Yeah. So what we've been doing in English and also in maths is we've been with the data that we gathered from the mock exams back in November and from other data that we have on your children, we have identified students and they've been working in small intervention classes, for example, in tutor time, where we have been looking in particular at the skills that they need help with in order to get better in certain areas of their reading. We've also been in English as well. We have been utilising a member of staff who has been taking small groups of children, looking at their ability to write better for both papers in English, for example, for the first paper where they're writing to describe, and for the second paper where they are writing a non-fiction piece. And each group has the children that have particular needs in those areas, and that we've been really targeting that work, and they've been making really good progress, and that will form evidence for the assessments for our grades for your children.
I think it's worthwhile as well, I might ask Mrs. York to come in. Within English, we really have been focusing within English language about the writing, and we've got lots of evidence that's been taking place. Do you want to talk through how we've done that sort of those writing assessments since September? And this is for the whole year group.
Yeah, so since September, all year 11 have been having a specific writing lesson per week. And that means that they have been every week being specifically taught the writing skills that they need. So that could be sentence structure, it could be grammar structures, it could be the ideas that are needed in writing. And every week that's been happening, and every 3 weeks the children have been sitting down and producing a piece of writing that has been assessed, and that's been happening since September for all children. And so we have a bank of data now and a bank of evidence that is showing your children's ability to write well for the 2 pieces of writing that are required for the English language exam.
Right, thanks, Miss. Okay, I'm not sure, is it you, Mrs. O'Reilly?
It is. So the next question is, if there isn't any new content being taught in school after Easter, what will be being taught within the time frame post-Easter?
So back in June, when we actually, back in June, we planned to make sure that the key concepts were being taught in September through to December. We really planned for that. And we planned to make sure that key assessment objectives had been met in September through to December. We normally always stop teaching new content in Easter because it's normally preparation for the exams. You've got to remember your child's being assessed on what has been taught, not what hasn't been taught. So from Easter up until the May half term, we're making sure that the children get the evidence, and are able to do the assessments within class that demonstrates their understanding of the assessment objectives. But that's no different to any other year, really. We always try and make sure that there's no new content taught from Easter, partly because it's hit by exam season. You have practical exams. You have modern languages exams. The exams start sort of, mid-May. But what we're making sure that we do is that we get the assessments done so that we've got all the evidence that we need to give your child the final grade and to give them every opportunity. So your children aren't being assessed on what's not been taught, they're being assessed on what has been taught, and we're making sure we give them every opportunity to demonstrate their ability in those key assessment objectives. Mr. Ward.
Could you please clarify what you mean by assessments? Are the assessments like exam papers?
No, so there's a mix. So it's not exam papers. With them cancelling exams, there was some conversations in the press about mini exams, and the Department for Education and Ofqual, who's the board that oversees the exam boards, they said that we couldn't do any exams. So there was no mini exams that would be taken. So they're not in a hall. They're not having to sit down and do it as if it's an exam. So for an assessment, it might well be in science. There might be a question off an exam paper, which is a 6-mark question, which covers some key assessment objectives. And the children will do that in class, and they'll do it with their teacher. And we know year 11 have come back so well after this lockdown, really focused, really ready for work. And I've got a very little tolerance threshold for any of those who perhaps aren't wanting to work in the same way. And they're doing it with their teachers in class. So it might well be, for an example, in history, there might be a question about, Mrs. O'Reilly, do you want to say this one about history? Because you've got this one down to a T in history, the way you describe it. Go on.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say this right now. So in terms of the questions, we will be saying to the children that obviously they're doing different topics. So we will be able to say to the children that if they're doing a topic on, say, Elizabeth I or Nazi Germany, they'll know what that question, they'll be able to see what that question is going to assess, and then they'll be able to revise and prepare accordingly. Is that what you meant, Miss Allen? Sorry.
Not quite, no. The correct right. So on the website, we've asked all the subject leaders to do a pro forma, which has all the questions on that are being used to form the evidence base. Yeah. And so in history, they might choose to do a long answer. And it may be that the child goes into the history class and they've been taught, they've done 2 sessions before, a reminder about Nazi Germany and what were the reasons for the rise of the Führer, and they will have a question that they have to answer on that. And that question is valid because it's assessing what has been taught, and it's also as well gives the teachers the opportunity to moderate and standardise those questions from all the children, and then obviously rank them and see which is the best from a grade 9 or all the way down. So that's something that we've been doing. It might be, for example, in science, we've asked the science teachers might be doing a past paper. One of the things that we're not sure of yet is there's lots of past papers that have been that are available, and we don't think the exam boards are going to put any particularly new material out. So we're making sure, because as I say right at the beginning, we got our teachers to demonstrate what the questions were that they were asking that assessed their curriculum, what they've been teaching. And we've gone through those, made sure that they're actually meeting the assessment objectives from the exam board, and the children answer them either in class, because some of them have been done previously, online. It might be in geography that they do a series of knowledge questions to understand, for example, their understanding about rivers, or about clouds, and all of that goes towards their final grade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything more? Do you want to say anything more on that?
No, I don't think so. I think you've covered everything there. This question, I think, links back to the question that Mr. Ward asked earlier that's come in before the session tonight, which is again about, it says, this is more in terms of the ability to infer and questions asking to find inferred meaning. So
in English, the ability to infer is a skill that is assessed. And we are aware of the fact that obviously, say, for example, a child who may have autism may find it difficult to infer. But we've been teaching that explicitly in Year 7. So your children will be very clear in terms of, within English, the best techniques to be able to infer from a piece of poetry or from a piece of writing. But actually, within English itself is the ability to infer, and that's a skill that is a skill that is assessed. Within our other exam assessment questions, we have made sure, as I said before, that that we're not assessing inference. So in maths is the best example to give. We make sure that the questions that are being asked in maths do not ask children to infer. So there's not lots of language around them. They're actually assessing the maths skill. Mrs. York, do you want to say anything else on that, obviously, in terms of you reading English? Yeah,
no, it's just that deducing and inferring is one of the assessment objectives, and because what we have done is the assessments we have set, we have looked very carefully at the assessment objectives. Not all the questions are about the ability to infer and to deduce, but it is one of the key underlying skills within English, and because of that, it is something that children have been being taught to do since like you say, well, actually since primary school. Unfortunately, it is a skill that is taught, that is assessed in English, but we have been equipping our students with the ability to do that. Also in small guided reading classes as well, we really focus on the skill of inferring when we are teaching reading in very small groups of children of 6 in Year 7 and Year 8. So it's been embedded within our curriculum really quite strongly.
But in other subject areas where it's not assessed and it's not an assessment objective from the exam board, all of that has been stripped out. So we're actually assessing what it is that they really want us to assess. Okay. Mr. Ward, you'll go.
Yep. What can parents do to support students and the school to ensure students get the best possible grades?
Make sure they're in. Make sure they come to school on time, wanting to work, and making sure as well when we share with you the sorts of questions that we've been asking, work with your children to if there's anything that they need to be doing at home, making sure they do it. And I know that's hard. I'm a parent of a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, and I might be a good head teacher, but sometimes I think I've been an absolutely terrible mum in terms of making them do the work that they're supposed to be doing. I think you have to, obviously they're going through quite a lot in terms of their anxiety. Some of them might be breezing through it, but just talking to them and telling them that actually, in a sense, I was brought up that if you work hard, then good things will come. That's what my parents always said to me. Put effort in. They never cared about the grades that I actually got. They just wanted me to show that I put some effort in and that what I got I deserved. And I think that's the best message that you can give to your children in terms of work hard, be there in school, put the effort in, and this is just one step for the future. And I don't think that any of the colleges are going to be discriminating against children this year. I really don't think that. And that they've been through a lot. They really have. But they've been phenomenal, really, in terms of the way that they've done this. So show an interest with your children. Make sure they come in, talk to us. Any questions, is two-way dialogue. One of the best things about the pandemic is the constant dialogue that I've been able to have with you, and I don't ever want to lose that. And I think they'll just email us, ask us questions. We might not get back to you straight away one night, but you can email any of us on here if you've got any questions at all about your children. on their subject teachers, they'll be happy to speak. Mrs. O'Reilly.
Yeah, the next question is a parent who's worried because her child is working 5 grades lower than she was predicted this time last year, and she's worried about how that gap can be fixed in such a short time. And she's also making the point that her end of year test, he has performed really well, so she's worried exactly how that gap will be recovered.
So she's been doing well. If she's been doing well now, then I think that's, evidence of the facts of what they are capable of, and those will be the grades that we're using to make sure that we give them the best advantage. But what I would say to that parent is, I'd like you to please get in contact. As soon as Mrs. O'Reilly's asked the question, I'd like you to get in contact with Mrs. O'Reilly tomorrow or Monday, just to have a conversation, particularly about your daughter, and we can have a look at that, because if she was predicted 5 grades higher this time last year, then I do have to, I've got a question that I want to ask there in terms of what evidence that they actually had. And I think that that's an individual conversation I'd like you to take up with Mrs. O'Reilly. So please contact the school. If you've not got Mrs. O'Reilly's email address, you can do it to me, alanj@failingepark.com, and I'll forward it to Mrs. O'Reilly for you to have that conversation as an individual. Simon, Mr. Ward.
Okay, we've got 2 questions from the same parent, Miss Allen. So the first one is, if my child feels she needs extra support in a certain subject, who do they need to ask?
So I would always ask the subject teacher, but we are always available. And if your child needs extra support in a specific subject, again, I'd say, sorry, Paula, make sure see Mrs. O'Reilly. And the reason why I say that is because Mrs. O'Reilly's put together additional support packages as well for children. So please speak to Mrs. O'Reilly about that. Tell them to come in and see you tomorrow, on Monday, and then we can look at those subject areas and see what it is that needs to be done. And we can be that go-between between her and the subject teacher, if that's easier. And that conversation with you, as I say, yourself, just get in contact with us. And part of these webinars are to be able to make sure that we support you and your children in the best way possible.
And the second question from the same parent, apologies, my daughter's just going to bed. The second question from the same parent, if my daughter prints out exam papers herself and completes them at home, will she be able to use them for a final grade?
No, because it will only be the assessments that we've set within school, because we have to make sure that we're not disadvantaging anybody. So you could have a situation whereby, think about it, you could have a situation whereby someone's got a private tutor and the private tutor sits with them. Well, that's not equitable. That's not what the exam boards want. So it's the assessments that we're delivering within school that will actually contribute to their final grade, and not anything else that a child's done outside of school or exam papers, because we can't ensure the reliability of that. We don't know, for example, whether it's, I'm sure it's not, but we don't know if it's, for example, whether a private tutor's done it for them. We've been asked to make sure that we're very clear about what assessments that we're using, and all of those will be on the website, all of those questions, and those will be the things that we use to actually form the final grade. Mrs. O'Reilly.
Yeah, last question at the moment. Will the optional exams set by the exam boards be available to students before they actually take the exam at school?
Yes, that's what we found out. But I wanted just a word of warning about this. So I only found this out in the Department of Education webinar yesterday. And the optional material will be there, but we're not going to use all of the optional material. So if you can imagine, if I take, for example, history is always the easiest one to do. We might teach Nazi Germany. Another school might not have planned to teach Nazi Germany until Easter this year. They might have taught the Industrial Revolution in September. So the exam board will be sharing a wealth of information, a wealth of questions for each of the subjects. For example, and Mrs. York, you can help me out because you know which books they've been studying in English. If, for example, we've taught a Christmas carol, the exam board will have questions on a Christmas carol that we can use, but they might also have questions on, what's another book, Mrs. York? Macbeth, that might not have been used, that we've not taught. So that material will be available, but we're not going to use all of that material. We're going to make sure that, and what we've been told to do is make sure that we pick the questions that match what we've been teaching. And we don't even have to do that. It's as I say, that's been a very frustrating part of this process. I think personally that they could have decided that way back in September and October, when they knew that pretty much exams weren't going to take place. But we still don't have full clarity on what these optional questions are going to look like, and we've been told we won't even get them until the week before we finish for Easter, which is, as you can imagine, has created quite a bit of fury amongst the education world.
One more question's come in, Miss Allen, just at the end there. Are there any interventions Are there any interventions after school? And if so, are they available to all the children, or do the teachers pick who needs it most?
No, so the interventions, as we said before, there's been revision classes that have been taking place all the way through. I have never worked, I know that I've created a good school now, because at dinner time, it's a bit more difficult at the moment with these extra restrictions. At dinner time, the maths block is just full of children learning and doing additional. They don't go home. A lot of the children, they stay behind, and they're open to anyone. I've never gone, being equitable is something that drives me personally and something that drives us as a school. So I've never gone down the route whereby we only target children who we need to get, say, from a grade 3 to a grade 4. Never done that. Your child wants to learn. If your child wants to study, we will provide the support for them. And the teachers, they really do give up a lot of their time. On a Friday night, sometimes when I'm going home, they've still had children. And I know it's been difficult this time because of the extra restrictions that we've got within school, but they are still going on.
And we've just done another one, just bob in, and then I'll end on a really nice comment from a parent. While I appreciate all time in school is important, would you say that the final week ending the 18th of June is absolutely critical to potentially improving the students' final grade?
No, we need to think about it working up to May half term, and the reason for that is, and I know what the press is saying, everything has to go in from June the 18th, but there's a huge amount of moderation and standardisation that needs to take place within school. So I have to sign to say that I'm responsible for all the grades that children have achieved, which, as you can imagine, is quite a huge weight really on my head. And we have got to moderate and standardise within school, which we're doing as we go along, all the way along, but we've got to take that data, and for those 2 weeks, one of the things that we're seeing across other schools across the country is what we're doing, which is using that time after May half term to make sure that actually the grades that we have got are fair, and making sure as well that the children have got the grades that they've been working at. So it may well be that it's only up to May half term that we have to work towards, because remember, it's what has been taught, it's not anything else. It's not it's not cramming like it was for exams. We've been assessing as we go along, and we've been assessing, as I say, right through year 10, through September, and we've seen the improvements. And the message that I gave to the year 10s back in June last year was, imagine your exams are cancelled and make sure that you work for it now. And there will be some children in year 11 who have done very little work, and the grade that they get will reflect that. And there will be many, many children who heeded my advice back in June and have really worked throughout year 11. And I have to say, right from September, I've been really pleased with year 11 as a year group.
So we've had parents saying thank you, Miss, that this has been really helpful for the parent and for their child. And I'll just read this one out because I think it's a really nice one to end on. Parent would like to say thank you to Miss Allen and to all the other staff because you have been amazing throughout this situation and have always helped support my children when needed.
Well, thank you very much, and I will continue to do so. It's my commitment I gave to you. I think when you all came in that very first year when I'd been at the school for, say, a month, and you came and you chose Phalange on the open evening, and I'm honoured. I'm absolutely honoured to work at Phalange. I really mean that. And I thank you for all your support as well, because it really is a true partnership. And we will have another meeting. This is the first of 5 webinars, as I say, that we'll do. The next one is March the 29th, which we're going to do a little bit earlier at 5 p.m. We're trying to mess around, obviously, with the timings, try and suit as many people as possible. But this will be available as well on the website. So thank you so very much for your time and your engagement. And I'm hoping that you have a nice rest of the evening. Take care now. Bye-bye.